Yo, I'm Troy, this is TM Fitness. Tracking methods. So there are a number of reasons and a number of methods that you can employ for tracking your food, tracking your calories and keeping on top of your food consumption in order to manage your goals. So first of all, obviously you need to define what those goals are. Is it fat loss? Is it weight maintenance? Is it weight gain? Once you know what it is that you're aiming for, then you can eat in accordance with that goal, obviously. So as I say, there's a number of methods that you can employ, and I've listed 7 on the board here from in order of effectiveness down. So number 1, by far the most accurate, is tracking your calories and tracking your macros, and that's protein, carbohydrates and fats by gram, not by percentage. So you would work out what the grams are of each of those macronutrients that you need to be eating within a certain calorie goal. It's the most accurate. If you stick to it, it's the most effective, but there are some downsides to it as well. It can be highly restrictive. It takes a lot of preparation time because you've got to batch cook a lot of meals and stick everything in Tupperware to reheat and reuse, and it doesn't allow for an awful lot of flexibility. So often people will adopt the mindset that if they eat something that's off their macro plan, if it doesn't fit their macros, then it's a cheat meal. Going out for dinner is a cheat meal, and I don't like that because it creates a disordered relationship with food. It creates this mentality that there's good versus bad, and that's just not the case. So for a lot of people, it becomes very obsessive, compulsive, and as I say, can create a really unnatural and uneasy, unhealthy relationship with food. It's probably worth trying and doing for a short period of time to give you a really good understanding of what a really balanced diet actually looks like. If you have very specific sports goals, particularly if you're very physique conscious, so you're going to get on stage in your smalls for a physique contest, then a very strict calories and macro diet is pretty much essential for that. And then below that, you've got calories and protein. And again, it's protein in grams, so at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass or target weight. And that allows a little bit more flexibility, because basically all you're doing is you're tracking your calories, you're making sure you hit a certain protein target, and then the rest of your calories are made up of whatever you eat. So it does allow for a more flexible approach to eating. It negates that whole cheat meal thing. It's the method that I employ more often than not with a lot of weight loss clients, because protein is important for weight loss in as far as it's supportive of the fat loss journey, because if you're eating adequate protein, you can assure that the majority of the weight you're losing is from body fat and not from muscle. And then number 3, you've got calories only. So obviously you're now not tracking your macronutrients, you're only counting your calories, and that is effective. If weight loss is the goal, then that really is the only metric that you need to track. But as I've said, protein is important as well. So that's, of the 3 top ones, which are the most accurate tracking methods, that's probably the most flexible, but of the 3 is probably the least effective. Then moving on from that, we've got 4 and 5. I've listed them 4 and 5, but they're both about equal in my eyes anyway. You've got portions. I like to use hands as a portion guide. So it's kind of similar to doing a macronutrient diet, but there's less maths involved. You're not having to track your calories and your macros using an app or anything like that. And then we've got time restricted eating, which is where you take a portion of time in the day, and that's when you're allowed to eat, and the rest of the time you're not allowed to eat. Simple as that. Some people call it intermittent fasting. I prefer to call it time restricted eating because it makes more sense in relation to what you're actually doing. And you can be quite flexible with that as well. So it could be that you have a 6-hour window, an 8-hour window, or a 10-hour window, and you can move that up and down your day to suit your schedule. So If you're going to be super busy in the evening, then maybe you have breakfast and your last meal is at lunchtime. If you're going to be busy in the morning, then you skip breakfast and your first meal is at lunchtime. Or any combination of that suits you, suits your lifestyle, suits your schedule, and suits your like your circadian rhythm, because different people are hungry at different times of the day. But literally all it is a way of controlling the amount of the volume of food and the number of calories that you're consuming throughout the day by restricting the amount of time you're allowed to eat in. And then we've got mindful eating. Mindful eating is literally you're just thinking about what you're eating. You think about, how will this food impact me? What does it taste like? Am I really hungry? How will I feel afterwards? So you ask yourself all these sort of questions, and then you just apply a little bit of mindful attentiveness to your eating. So you stop yourself from overindulging, and it works better if you've done any or all of the above. So if you've tracked your calories and your macros for a while, or you've at least tracked calories and protein for a while, you have a good understanding of what the composition of the foods that you're eating is in terms of nutritional composition and energy density. And then you can be just a bit more mindful about what you're eating and not have to track once you understand that and you're able to eyeball your food. You can, of course, combine any two or all three of these here, which is why I put the bracket there, to make it even more accurate if you like. It's entirely up to you, and again, it depends on what your goals are. And then at the bottom I've put here intuitive eating. Intuitive eating, I don't like using that term really. I prefer mindful eating to intuitive eating, because intuitive eating to me indicates that you're eating your emotions. You know, for example, I have a pretty good understanding, I've done all these things, I have a pretty good understanding in nutrition. So I know what's good for me, what's not so good for me, and in what quantities. And so I apply that mentality to my food selections, which is mindful eating. If I was to eat intuitively and only eat what my body wants me to eat, then I would exist solely on a diet of curry, flapjacks and IPA, and that's not good for you. And most people who are overweight and very overweight and have been overweight for a number of, for a period of time, have very unusual relationships with food and emotions. Often there's a lot of emotional eating going on. So if they eat intuitively, they will end up just feeding their emotions and overeating and overindulging. So intuitive eating, not great. Kind of sounds a little bit like semantics, the difference between intuitive and mindful eating, but in practice there's a vast difference there. So there you go. So just a really simple breakdown of the different types of tracking. The more accurate and the more specific you want to get, then the higher up that list you go. But be aware that the more accurate and the more specific you get with that, the more restrictive it's going to feel as well. So it's got to match your goals. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments box. And please do, if you want to see more of these videos, then please do support me on Patreon. Laters.